past the midnight hour. We're talking about Trident. Now, I remember at school there were big debates about nuclear weapons, and people would wear, ban the bomb badges and all the rest of it. And I then remember the Labour Party in the mid-1980s tearing themselves to pieces over unilateralism, i.e., let's throw away our nuclear weapons and let's hope others in the world follow us. But I genuinely thought this debate had disappeared in about 1985-86 and wouldn't resurface again. I thought there was an acceptance that in a world where there are wicked people, you have to possess these weapons as a deterrent to stop them doing terrible things to you. And yet, the debate's back. I guess it's been prompted because we've seen a change in politics in Britain. We've seen the Scottish National Party become the dominant party in Scotland, and they're unilateralists. And Jeremy Corbyn, of course, has become the Labour leader, and he has been a unilateralist for well over the 30 years that he's been in Parliament. And we've also, of course, this year seen the 70th anniversaries again, but the 70th anniversary of the dropping of the bombs on Hiroshima and Nagasaki. And I remember being on a long car journey back in August and listening to some of the survivor accounts, not just of the bomb and its immediate aftermath, but the fact that, of course, it led to people having mutations and illnesses and cancers for many, many decades afterwards. Nobody in this debate doubts that nuclear weapons are absolutely horrible, horrible, wicked things. And indeed, Albert Einstein, who was one of the great brains behind the nuclear bombs, once said famously that the Fourth World War would be fought with sticks and stones. So this debate, folks, is not about nuclear weapons in themselves being good or bad things. They're horrid. They're awful. The question in this next hour is, are they necessary? Is it worth the price? Would Britain be a safer country if we maintained our Trident nuclear defence? And we go to our first caller, Sean in Portsmouth. Sean, good evening.
Good morning, Nigel. Thanks for taking my call.
Okay, far away.
It's a real pleasure to get to speak to. I'm against renewing the Trident programme. Basically, I think it's going to cost us far too much money for what the net result is going to be, which is our proposed safety. And secondly, I think there's a far more sinister sort of geopolitical kind of situation with a war agenda, basically. I've never known any sort of peace during my adult life. We seem to be perennially at war with other countries, and I think by getting rid of our nuclear arsenal and having a more sensible foreign policy, I think that would be the correct way to go for the future.
Well, Sean, look, let's deal with foreign policy. I mean, the bombing of Libya was one of the most extraordinary schoolboy errors that we've ever seen in British foreign policy, without any thought as to what the consequences were of removing and getting rid of Gaddafi. And indeed, the destabilisation of Libya has been such that is where, of course, the first great wave of migrants coming across the Mediterranean came from, a country much of which is in the hands of the wrong sort of people, criminal traffickers, etc. So I totally agree, Sean, with you. We need a better foreign policy by far. One where if we do intervene militarily, and I'm a great one that believes that is just about the most serious thing any government can do, and you don't do it unless you've got a proper long-term strategy, all of which was absent, certainly in Iraq, to an absolutely huge degree, perhaps less so in Afghanistan, but certainly in Iraq. So I agree with you. A better foreign policy, a foreign policy where we interfere and fiddle around rather less than we've done. I'm with you on all of that. Where I struggle a bit, Sean, with your argument is you say that it's a bit too expensive, but surely there is no price that is too high if it's paid to ensure national security. And isn't that the primary job of a British government?
No, I would agree with most of their sentiments normally, but I just think that a lot of what we're doing on the global stage at the moment is affecting our security, basically. We're not making sensible decisions. You've mentioned Libya and Iraq.
Yeah.
I mean, look at the Chilcot inquiry. I mean, that's been put back until sort of, what is it, July next year or whatever it is.
I think it's I think it's 2030. It's coming out now, something like that.
Something's really not smelling right with me, Nigel, and that's why
Sean,
this money.
Come on, listen, mate. We're not disagreeing, right, about the outrage, that Chilcot. I mean, we've been waiting longer for the Chilcot report than the entire Second World War lasted. So I don't disagree. I don't disagree with you on that. I don't disagree with you about many of the foreign policy mistakes. But back to the issue. I'm pressing you, Sean. Is £20 billion too much to pay if it ensures that we are safer as a country?
I think we could spend it on maybe other areas like our armed forces, like reinforcing our military equipment, as opposed to weapons of mass destruction, basically. I mean, I can't envisage a situation where our sitting Prime Minister is going to be in a place where we're going to be threatening somebody with a nuclear weapon. Well,
the idea... Hang on. The idea is we would use it. It is the ultimate form of defence. Sure, that's the argument for this. It's the ultimate form of defence. I think we need it. Although it's very expensive, and I hate seeing what's happened to the armed forces over the course of the last few years, so I do get that part of your argument. I think it's necessary. I guess some would say, even if we had it, would a British Prime Minister ever actually use it? I do understand that argument, but Sean, I think ultimately we will agree to disagree on the need to have Trident, but we agree on almost everything else, mate. All right?
Yeah, I'm coming to see you in Basingstoke in a couple of weeks, Nigel, so I look forward to it.
I hope you're not too disappointed. Thanks very much indeed. Thank you, Sean. Moving on to Ronnie in Leicester.
Hello, Nigel.
Hello there. I'm fine, thank you. And you?
Yeah, totally agree. We need it for a deterrent. No one wants to use it, but we're going to be vulnerable if we don't have it.
Yeah, I mean... Do you think, Ronnie, maybe there's an argument we should find a cheaper alternative, or do you think that it needs to be this deep sea Trident submarine?
It's got to be Trident. If it's a cheap alternative, will the rest of the world go to a cheaper alternative?
No, I'm afraid they won't. I mean, I have to confess that it's one of the things that I looked at and thought about, because there are 4 of these submarines, and there was a proposal from the Liberal Democrats that maybe we could reduce it to 3 submarines, and I was sort of quite tempted by that.
Sorry, Nigel, who are the Liberal Democrats?
Oh, well, they were quite a big party at one point. But I mean, they talked about 3. It was Ming Campbell talked about reducing to 3 a few years ago, and I kind of looked at that, and the logistics of that didn't work. And then I thought, well, could we have land-based sites? Could we have land-based missiles? And the answer to that was, actually, in the modern world, the enemy would find them so quickly that it wouldn't be effective. So I was hoping to try and find, was there a cheaper way of doing this? I don't think there is. And so I think we've got to keep Trident, Ronnie. And there you are. I'm with you, and thank you very much indeed for your call. We're going to go to Denny from Market Drayton in Shropshire.
Hello, Nigel. Thank you for taking my call.
Not a bit. What have you got for me?
Well, first of all, I just want to make clear I am actually a Corbynite and a Labour voter, but I disagree with him, and it's one of the few things I agree with UKIP on, is the fact that we do need a strong nuclear deterrent. I don't think it lies in Trident.
Now, you've got a bit of a problem, Denny, haven't you, as a Labour supporter? Because let me just try and get this right. So the Scottish Labour Conference has voted against Trident, but the Scottish leader is for Trident, and then in England and Wales, the leader of the party is against Trident, but the party is for Trident. How on earth, Denny, are Labour going to sort out this mess?
Well, that's a very interesting question. I personally, for England and Wales, put great stock in Tom Watson to moderate Jeremy a bit and keep him on the straight and narrow.
But you know his instincts. He's been a CNDer. He's been a unilateralist for the whole of his adult life.
I must admit it does worry me, and I do think that he could lose the election on Trident.
Well, I mean...
When it comes to Scottish Labour, I think they're just desperately trying to basically trying to win anything back from the SNP after being slaughtered up there. They're just going to try anything, so I think it's a lost cause. But I would hope for our deputy leader.
Well, all I can say, Denny, is looking at the way this is shaping up, as I said at the start, in the introduction to this debate, I remember those Labour conferences. I'm old enough to remember them in the mid-1980s, where the party was literally ripping itself to pieces on this issue of unilateralism. And I tell you this, Denny, I think where you are on this is where the majority of the British public are. 2/3 of the British public, whilst they may regret nuclear weapons, and whilst one or two might like a cheaper alternative, believe that Britain needs to have them to be a major player in the world and to be able to protect ourselves. Thank you very, very much indeed. Welcome back to Late Night Farage, where we're discussing Trident, whether we should keep it, whether we should scrap it, and a very big range of opinions. And our next caller is Carlton from Celtic. Carlton, good evening.
Hello, I just really want to say that if the...
It sounds like Carlton may have been on the source. Right, now moving on to Terry from Milton Keynes.
Good morning, Nigel. You'll get a better argument than the last caller. You can't go wrong with me.
Go on, Terry.
98 countries in the world, and only 7 feel the need for nuclear weapons. 191 countries don't seem to worry about having nuclear deterrence.
No, and that is because the vast majority of countries don't have the technology or the money to be able to afford nuclear weapons, and they're not major powers in the world. The question, I suppose, Terry, is what do we want Britain's place in the world to be? And it's a bit difficult for us to run away from the fact that whilst our population may not be that big, we are, in terms of influence, still a very major, or we should be certainly, a major global player in many, many ways.
I think we are. I mean, there's 2 major flaws with nuclear weapons. The first major flaw is if you don't use, if you're spending 100 billion and you don't use that nuclear bomb, you've wasted your money, and if you do use it, it's good night Vienna. I mean, if you look at Russia, I mean, it was always primed to be facing Russia. Russia doesn't need to nuke the United Kingdom; they could just walk and take it. I mean, we've got a depleted army, we've got virtually no aircraft left, no navy. They could walk in. We could barely defend the Falklands now. So Russia could take United Kingdom in 24 hours. Are we going to use a first strike of a nuclear bomb if the Russians invade? I don't think so.
Terry, again, another caller where I agree with you very strongly on what's happened to Britain's conventional forces. I mean, go to Portsmouth now. There are more museum vessels in Portsmouth than there are Royal Naval vessels. I can't believe what they've done. I can't believe that the British Army has been slashed the way it was. And when Osborne is asked about further cuts, he absolutely refuses to say he won't slash further the already pretty paltry size of the British Army. I do get all of those things, and I do understand, Terry, that if we weren't spending up to 20 billion over the course of the next few years on renewing Trident, there would perhaps be more money for our conventional forces. I do understand that. I do understand that, but surely, if, and you said Russia, but I don't think that's necessarily the right example, but if a country, had some territorial ambitions, on us, would not the fact that we had something that could hurt them so severely, it could wipe out their centre of government, would that not be a massive deterrent that would stop them from doing it?
Yeah, I think, would we attack a country that hasn't got nuclear weapons with our nuclear weapons? I don't really think so. As I say, I'm ex-forces, and I think it's outrageous that you sack 20,000 British troops.
So do I.
To spend money on a bomb that we're probably never going to... We wouldn't actually use the bomb. I would sooner spend that money on conventional forces.
Okay, no, Terry, I get the conventional forces argument, I really, really do. But I mean, so what you're saying, and I did sort of discuss this a little bit earlier on, what you're saying is you think there are no circumstances in which we'd ever actually use the thing?
Well, if you look at the countries that, and I think we should actually be we've created a Cold War. I mean, going back to this Merkel in Ukraine, we've created a Cold War that we needn't have done with Russia, with Ukraine.
Yes.
I think that Russia would be a great ally, and I think they was the only threat to the UK when we had these nuclear weapons. So I don't think there's anybody that's got nuclear weapons that's likely to attack us anyway.
Well, let's hope that ISIS never get them, eh?
Well, that's the problem, you see, because as people have said before, if a terrorist group gets this nuclear weapon, how can you attack a country because a terrorist cell have got some sort of dirty bomb that they're going to bring over? That's the trouble.
Yeah.
But the thing is, £100 billion, if you spent 100k per house, you could build...
Well, Terry, hang on a second. The government tell us it'll cost 20 billion. Greenpeace tell us it could cost 34 billion.
Well, I had 100 billion.
Well, but that's CND. That's CND telling us it's 100 billion. I'm not so sure I rely very much on CND, although I did know one of their ex-officials very well, Baroness Cathy Ashton, who became...
Great, she is.
And she became our commissioner in Brussels, and from what I could see, her only main achievement in life was to have been treasurer of CND back in the late 1970s and early 1980s, when their sources of income were dubious, to say the least. Terry, I agree with you about our conventional forces and the absolute shameful rundown of them. And I understand that this weapon's expensive, but don't believe the CND figure of 100 billion. You've made a very strong argument that says we'd never use them anyway. I respect you for your view. I still think that we need to have that deterrent. But thank you very much, Terry and Milton Keynes, for your call. Dario in Dartford is our next caller. Dario, good evening. Or good morning. Good morning, I guess it is now, yeah.
Good morning. Just one thing that's kind of niggling me a bit about this whole debate. I do think we should keep it, definitely. But a lot of people who say get rid of it and spend the money on something else, I don't think they realise that if we scrapped it, we wouldn't have that 20 billion or 100 billion, whatever it is. We wouldn't have that to spend on something else. It doesn't work that way.
No, well, of course, Dario, this is not a lump sum, 20 billion. We pay this.
It's about 70p per head of working population a day or something, isn't it?
Yeah, and it's actually budgeted over, a couple of decades. So it isn't like, there's 20 billion sitting on a drawer. In a drawer in the Treasury, and do we spend it on Trident? Do we spend it on nuclear forces? Do we have an enormous street party? I don't know, but no, it is. You're right. It isn't as simple as that. And anyway, what we shouldn't forget when we talk about government money is that we are still running at a whacking, huge, massive annual deficit of about 80 billion pounds a year. So we're in financial trouble, whatever we're spending money on.
Yeah.
The question is, Dario, having Trident and renewing Trident, does that make us a safer country? That's the question I'm asking. What do you think?
I think it would make us a much safer country if we could keep the everything that we developed alongside it, which is not the current format.
What do you mean by that?
Well, so at the moment we borrow the money to renew Trident, okay? Yeah. And everything we develop along the way isn't ours because it belongs to the financer, the lender. Until we pay off the debt, which of course will never be repaid because it goes on for years and years, as you know. So if we could somehow, finance it and, keep the whatever we develop as something that we sell, then that would benefit us directly. Wow. But I know that's pie in the sky, but
I know. Well, whichever way we look at it, Dario, we're in financial trouble, and you and I will agree on that. And thank you very much indeed for calling in. Victor in Devon. Victor, good evening. What do you think?
I think it's a great deal of money for something that you're not going to actually use ever. But anyway, apart from that, Nigel, I'm a great admirer ever since I saw you demolish Van Rompuy in the European Parliament. But one thing I wanted to say, it's not really to do with this discussion, but I'm a great fan of comedy programs, late night comedy programs. And one thing I found a little bit disturbing is this Farage bashing that seems to go on.
Oh well,
I don't know what you feel.
Well,
about
that. I mean, look, Victor. Trident's damned expensive. We'll agree on that. But the question is, ultimately, the job of a British government is to protect this nation, and there is no bill that is too high if it actually is going to protect us. All right, but I mean, I know there are many that think we'd never ever use it. Now, as for the comedians, so-called, many of them highly unfunny out there that do a lot of, Farage bashing, they're all a certain type, aren't they, it seems? Sort of balding, overweight, middle-aged comedians, with their metropolitan views of the world and their rich mummies and daddies. Do you know what, Victor? I couldn't care less, and please don't get offended on my behalf when these people have a go. Laugh it off as I do. Do you promise me you'll do that?
Well, the thing, what I find, it always boils down to that you're a racist.
I know, which is grossly unfair.
Which is very unfair.
Yeah, it is grossly unfair. But I'm afraid that our comedians, in many ways, have become part of the establishment itself, and I have to say, I think a lot of them are pretty unfunny. What I do like, though, Victor, what I do that we're still good at cartoons, and there are some absolutely wonderful cartoons of me, and in many ways, no matter how cruel they are, they still make me laugh, and it's one of the few things that still makes me buy our national newspapers. Victor, thank you very much, and thank you for your concern. I don't like being called those things at all. I don't believe any of it is fair, but I guess for a bit, I'm going to continue to have to put up with it. When you challenge the establishment in this country, they fight back, and they bite back, and they make life pretty bloomin' difficult. Welcome back to Late Night Farage. Well, we're debating Trident, whether we should keep it, whether we should scrap it. Does it cost too much money? Is that irrelevant? Because defence of the realm is the most important thing a government can do. Would we ever use it? A question that has been brought up by several callers. And I wonder, I suppose, I could even throw in a doubt onto my own argument. How independent is it? Is it really an independent nuclear deterrent? Or could we not use it unless the Americans gave us the code? I'd love an expert to ring in and perhaps give us a view on that. I sense, a huge division amongst callers on this subject. The next caller is Jacob from Colchester. Jacob, good evening.
Hello, Nigel.
Hi.
I'd like to expand on your point that you just made.
Yep.
That, yes, our nuclear deterrent is not independent. We are subservient to America, and our natural ally, as was expressed by our shared idol Enoch Powell, our shared ally is Russia, and our shared enemy is America and Europe. Now, I'd just like to make the point that Trident is of no consequence to the defense of our realm. And if you'll indulge me for just a minute, to give a little bit of context, we talked about history, and we'd like to talk a little bit about the history of empires. Now, the high noon of Baghdad was in 800, but by the 10th century it became degenerate, corrupt, materialistic. Now, the high noon of our empire, as you perhaps might agree, was during Lord Salisbury's splendid isolation. But now we can see that the collapse of our view to pessimism, as we've had on this programme with a couple of callers, materialism, frivolity, the welfare state, the weakening of religion, the debasement of our currency, which I've heard you speak quite a lot about, quantitative easing, which is a point that we both agree on, and fundamentally the influx of foreigners. Now, Germany is about to take in 20 million by 2020.
Jacob, fine, but let's just come back to this point about whether we should have nuclear weapons and whether they would make us. And okay, there is this question about how independent as a nuclear deterrent it is. But on the big principle, Jacob, do you think the United Kingdom should have a nuclear deterrent?
Well, we have a nuclear deterrent, but the question is whether or not we should renew it. And whether or not we renew it is of no consequence, because the reason that we're going to be destroyed as a country is not because of Russia dropping nuclear bombs on us. It's from within. It's from the collapse of our own society.
Fine. Jacob, fine. And I do understand that, the point that you're making, but it is slightly so. I'm trying to keep this debate onto the issue of Trident and, whether we have a nuclear deterrent, how independent it is or not. I would just say this to you, that, idle was a bit of a strong word used earlier, but yeah, Powell thought Russia was our traditional ally, not America. That was a view that he took. All I would say, Jacob, is this. The point about having a nuclear deterrent should be that you never know in the future who the enemy is going to be, North Korea or, whoever it may be. I, like you and all of us, have questions about the cost of Trident, have, small doubts about how independent it is. I'm not a fanatical Trident supporter. I wish we didn't have to have it. I just think that it's a modern reality that, frankly, we have to have it. But anyway, Jacob, thank you very much indeed for your call. Our next caller is Anas from Glasgow. Good evening.
Hello, Nigel. Hi. I'm actually looking out towards the northwest of Glasgow and Vaseline, 20 miles away from where I am at this moment. And it actually makes me shake with fear that we even have nuclear weapons on our doorstep. Now, there are two reasons why I'm fundamentally opposed to nuclear weapons. First of all, it's an absolutely destructive tool anyway in itself. But the second thing is, we talk about economic costs here. I heard somewhere this week or last week where the cost has now been estimated to be around about £167 billion, which is, I think, more than twice, if I rightly remember, the size of the UK deficit. And that in itself, I think, just pretty much kills off any argument in favour of having nuclear weapons. And if people are saying it's actually if it's actually being used, it's not independent of the UK's capabilities to use it, then what's the point?
Well, there are lots of arguments here. I think the financial numbers that you've been given are just completely wrong. Okay, it's damned expensive, but it's not that damned expensive. Yeah, I get it. You're on the doorstep of it. And that, of course, will heighten concern, as indeed, people living near nuclear power stations are always concerned. Could there be a problem with that? But let me ask you a question.
Okay.
Let me ask you a question, because there is a moral dimension to this that we haven't really touched on yet, on this programme tonight. I mean, do you think it was right or wrong to use the bombs at Hiroshima and Nagasaki 70 years ago?
But these were different times, weren't they? I mean, I think any use of nuclear weapons, I think, to be honest, is an abhorrence in itself, because, again, it is just extremely destructive. I mean, the damage it causes in any context is cataclysmic. Now, of course, you do mention nuclear power stations, and obviously there is a danger, a continuous danger and a continuous risk assessment that always has to get carried out. Now, I just think, whilst, okay, my view might be idealistic, and yes, people might counter it and say, well, what about the realism of the world that we're in today? But in itself, I think if the UK actually stood up and took a lead and actually disarmed itself from having weapons of mass destruction, then that in itself would send, I would probably think, a positive message out to the world that, frankly, there is a different way, and rather than just sticking to this idea of something that I think is frankly insecure and carrying, and David Cameron calls it insurance policy, but I just think it's almost a sign of insecurity just to hold on to something that's so destructive and that's frankly just going to end in disaster in any context.
Anas, you're right about the sheer destructiveness of these weapons, and you clearly believe in what you're saying very, very strongly. If we got rid of nuclear weapons, maybe the rest of the world would see sense and get rid of theirs. I don't take that optimistic a view on human nature. There are even some in this country, some in politics in this country, who think it might be great to get rid of our army. And that by doing that, the world would become peaceful. I don't share your faith, I'm afraid, in the rest of human nature. But thank you for the call and some of the very powerful points that you made there. Paul from Manchester, what do you think?
Hi, Nigel.
Hello.
You're right. Just a really quick one, just an economic point, really. It's funny, the idea that people say it's going to cost X billion of pounds, but you can just go into an American shop and pick up 20 Trident nuclear warheads. the reality is that all this money filters down through a supply chain made up of tens of thousands of people with very particular skill sets. And these skill sets, these are people's livelihoods, and it goes right from the top level down to the buddy vans outside the factories supplying, the food for the workers. So by removing this industry and these special skills, we lose out from like a full manufacturing base, and it'll be detrimental to the country, in my opinion.
No, Paul, I get that. You're absolutely right. There is a big supply chain, and indeed our previous caller, Anas, would notice that if Faz Lane wasn't there, there would probably be quite a dip in the local economy in his area. I understand that. However, the argument that it's good for the economy and good for jobs and good for local areas is fine on its own, but it wouldn't justify doing something that was wrong, all right? It wouldn't justify doing something that was wrong. I happen to think it justifies doing something that is necessary, regrettable, but necessary. And I think, Paul, you said it was a quick one, and you make a very fair point, and thank you. We go to Brian is it Stiddark in Norfolk, Brian?
It's Stimmard.
Right. Okay, well, I tried. What point have you got for me?
Well, basically, I'm in favour of Trident. The reason being, the way the world is at the moment, I mean, we've got NATO carrying out military manoeuvres almost on Russia's border, to coin a phrase you use, poking the bear. We've got the Russians fighting ISIS in Syria now, and the Americans a stone's throw away, who are announcing that they're starting to carry out operations against ISIS as well. These forces getting that close together with this kind of stuff going on, to me, it's a recipe for disaster. Sanctions, harsh language isn't going to stop somebody from pressing the button. The only thing that stops people pressing the button is the fear that somebody else has got a button to press in retaliation. As you said earlier, nuclear weapons are the most evil thing that man's ever created.
Yeah.
And one honestly hopes we never have to use them again.
Yeah.
The use of them on Nagasaki and Hiroshima, it gave us an insight of what can happen. So we know the dangers of it, and hopefully the fact that there are a number of nations that haven't is enough to keep everybody in check from pressing their buttons.
No, Brian, you believe in the straightforward deterrent argument that I put forward earlier, as you say. Yeah, I mean, and I completely understand that. Interesting. I mean, that first point you made, I find it really interesting. Perhaps in an odd way, during the Cold War, the world was much more stable. There were these two big blocks staring at each other, and actually since all of that has disappeared, as you say, we've got instability, we've got the growth of ISIS, we've got worsening relations between Russia and countries in Europe and elsewhere. We've got, the Arab Spring, which has hardly led to much harmony in that part of the world. Maybe the world is much less certain and much less safe than it's been for a very long time. And if that's the case, Brian, it reinforces your argument for us to have a proper deterrent. And thank you very much.
The reality is as well, I mean, all right, we have a conventional military. It's been run down. But even if we build it back up again, we do not have the money and we do not have the population to match a country like Russia in a conventional military.
No, Brian, thank you. Welcome back for the last instalment of Late Night Farage, where we are discussing Trident. Does it make Britain a safer place? Is it affordable? Would we ever use it? How independent is it? What is the morality of using nuclear weapons? We could go on forever, but we've only got a few minutes left. Patrick from Eltham, what can you tell us?
Hello, good morning, Nigel.
Good morning.
I'll make this one brief because I know you probably want to get to bed soon.
No, I'm in bed. All this sleep's very overrated, Patrick. Anyway, go on.
Yeah. Well, next time we'll have to make it 6 hours. What I basically wanted to ask, due to the fact that Scottish Labour have backed the scrap Trident vote, do you think by 2020 that Jeremy Corbyn perhaps will convince the English Labour to adopt that policy as well?
Good question. No. I don't think he will. And I think what the Scottish Labour Party were doing today, in defiance of their own leader, was trying to out-SNP the SNP. The fact that parties take positions does not necessarily mean that countries always follow. And I mean, we've had a great debate tonight and some very, very strong, powerful, emotive arguments against Trident and against its renewal, and I respect all of those arguments that I've heard tonight, but I still believe a clear majority of the British people today do and will continue in 2020 to believe that we need to have that ultimate deterrent. So however charming Jeremy Corbyn is, I don't think he's going to convince us. Why do you think he will?
No, probably not. I think it's very evident to see the splits in the Labour Party now, or perhaps more than it was under Ed Miliband. But I completely agree with you, what you were saying in the debate. It's a bit like paying your home insurance.
Well,
if something does go wrong, you're insured. Do you know what I mean?
Absolutely. Thank you very much, Patrick, which leads me on neatly to some more SMSs. And the first one here is, it says, the first cheque is for the house, the second for the insurance. Trident is that insurance. Insurance is something you buy and pray you don't have to use. I absolutely, completely, totally and utterly endorse that in the whole general point of defence of the realm. More SMSs. I make this point on Trident very simplistically. What does it cost us in 1 year to be in the EU? And if you balance that against 20 billion on Trident, which protects the long-term safety of the people in the UK, for the cost of the EU over the next 20 years, we could buy a lot of Tridents. But I'm not suggesting we should spend all that wonderful dividend that we're going to get on nuclear weapons. Nigel, the idea of abandoning our nuclear deterrent is absolute madness. The argument that the radical left always make is that it's stupid to pay for a weapon that we will never use. What they don't understand is that we're not paying to never use our nuclear weapons, we're paying to stop our enemies using theirs. Scrapping our nuclear deterrent would reduce us to an international laughingstock. Will from Brighton. Very powerfully made. And a couple more if I got time. Yes, I have. If we got rid of Trident, it would be one less thing for terrorists to worry about. Not a good idea. Mark Hill tweets, we don't need Trident nuclear missiles anymore. I agree with Scottish Labour on this. So lots and lots of very strong points of view. We're now going to Alex in Felixstowe in Suffolk. Alex, hello.
Yeah, hi there. I've been asked to get straight on with my points. We're running out of time.
We are.
What I was going to say is just that I'm not certain Trident's the right weapon. You know, over the last 40 years, while we've had the sort of second strike independent deterrent, most of the politicians and the naval figures have actually wondered if it could ever be used. You know, and the reality is it's all it's designed to do is extract retribution against, millions and millions and millions of innocent Russians. And even if Britain had been attacked, whether that would be a good thing to do. And that maybe a smaller nuclear deterrent, maybe on a battleship delivered by a cruise missile, or,
Well, Alex, what you raise is a perfectly fair, valid point, and we did say this earlier on in the hour, that I'd looked at some of the cheaper options. If somebody could show me a cheaper option that had the degree of security in terms of not being accessible very easily by the enemy, and reliability and maintained our deterrent, I would certainly look at it too. And Alex, thank you very much indeed for that call. John in Kingston, good morning.
Good morning, Nigel. Great show.
Thank you.
I'd just like to say, as much as I hate funding the corporates' arms race, and as much as I hate nuclear weapons, we're in a more dangerous time than I think we've ever been in, as you more or less said yourself. I mean, Europe seems to have gone mad. Who the hell's governing Europe? I don't know. Merkel seems to have done an about-turn on what she was saying a few years back, and the way borders potentially are falling right up to the Middle East, etc., etc. I foresee that, Europe's going to end up a dangerous place if they don't start listening to their people. The far right, some people say you're far right. I don't see you as far right. I see you as libertarian. But, if governments are not prepared to listen to their own people and start to take a commonsensical view on what's going on.
I think there is great division in Europe, huge political change, and, far right. What about the far left? What about Syriza? What about Podemos in Spain? I mean, if people are unhappy, they will move to more extreme political positions. And it's a perfectly fair point, John, but it's not directly related to nuclear deterrence. But thank you. We go to Charles in Stevenage in Hearts.
Good afternoon. Sorry,
Try morning, Charles. Go on. I've been struggling with it too, but it is morning, I promise you. Far away. Go on, please.
Well, I think it's absolutely disgusting that we would ever buy a nuclear weapon. I mean, when are you ever going to need it? Apart from the deterrent, you could spend the money on non-nuclear bombs instead, of course.
Well, Charles,
do you not think so? I mean,
no. Of course, I understand that argument, but the point of us buying nuclear weapons is not that we ever want to use them, and that we believe by having them, there's less chance of somebody else using theirs. It is an argument about deterrence. It's not an argument about us actually wanting to use this in an aggressive capacity in any way at all. And I go back, Charles, hang on. I go back to a point that's cropped up a couple of times, and a point that I've made many times over the years. If you've bought a new house, Charles, you need to insure it. And I think that having a nuclear deterrent is the insurance for our country.
Would much rather insurance that I could use instead of decimating populations, resources, and genetically killing off people in the future. Any survivors of the particular blast. I mean, you can't use that insurance.
It is a horrid thought, but we did use it once before. In fact, not for insurance. We used it, the Americans used it to shorten the war against Japan. We used it in Hiroshima and Nagasaki. And I wonder, by using it, did we possibly not save hundreds of thousands of lives? Charles?
That is true,
yeah. Well, there you are. Charles, thank you. And we'll go on to the last call, I think, that I'm going to take this evening, and it's Chris in Wickford. Good morning, Chris.
Good morning, Mr. Farage. It's an honour to speak to you, but I just wanted to say there's something that's really crossed my mind after listening to this. Some of the rubbish that I've heard from some people is... at 9 o'clock this evening, I had a newborn son born.
Congratulations.
Thank you very much. I am absolutely worried about his future, because you have a lot of people who have, I don't know if it's a left-leaning agenda or a utopian agenda. They live in a world where they think that their opinion is fact, and opinion isn't fact. We need a deterrent. Unfortunately, I would love it if we could live in a world where we didn't have nuclear weapons and things. But if we don't have a deterrent, we leave the door open. And I think it's absolutely sickening that people like Corbyn and various other people who are actually basing a lot of what they're saying on their opinion rather than any solid facts, and that is the problem that we have here. It's like some of the callers when they
Chris, this is what you get in a democracy. You get different opinions, and I agree with you. Some people are, I think, rather idealistic about the world. Listen, thank you for that call. It's the last call I'm going to take, and congratulations on the birth earlier this evening. What on earth you're doing ringing me, I don't know. But thank you very much indeed. And can I say a massive thank you to LBC for hosting me. I don't think I've done anything disastrously wrong. I don't know, perhaps I have. We'll find out if the lawyer's waiting outside the door, won't we? I've enjoyed this hugely. I've never done this before. It was a virginal experience. I was helped through by the production team here, and by you ringing in and tweeting and helping and getting involved. So it's really been, I have to say, an amazing 3 hours. I've loved it. Thanks for, I think, what was a very high level of participation.
You didn't frankly have the balls to put country before party.